Varsågod.
Welcome everyone to this seminar hosted by us, Fossil Free Sweden, together with World Energy Council Sweden and Lead It, the leadership group for industry transition. My name is Malin Strand. I work for Fossil Free Sweden and I'm the moderator for today's seminar. The last 3 years, the biggest change in climate policy development in Sweden has been the shift from industry feeling forced into climate regulations to industry taking the lead, setting bold targets, and suggest the needed policy themselves for how to reach net zero emissions in their industries. And that is what we are going to talk about today. Today's schedule is full of net zero experience, and we will hear 3 examples from 3 Swedish sectors that have developed their own roadmaps for how to reach net zero emissions with increased competitiveness. And we will also hear views from 2 different country representatives and listen to their comments about this Swedish approach. But to start with, we need to know more about what happened in Sweden the last couple of years. And I would like to welcome Svante Axelsson. After long experience in an environmental NGO, he was appointed by the Swedish government as the national coordinator for Fossil Free Sweden. And he has been a key person in gathering and motivating Swedish industry into these actions. So Svante Axelsson, welcome. And I first want to ask you, what is Fossil Free Sweden?
Thanks for the invitation and to be part of this conference. Yes, good question. What is Fossil Free Sweden? It's a national and governmental initiative to speed up the tempo of the transition of the Swedish economy. Our work is to promote the industry in this transition to be the first fossil-free welfare nation. It's a small organization. It's only by 7 persons now, but we have 500 supporters, you can say, in the network, mostly companies, but also local municipalities. That all part of this Swedish vision to be the first fossil-free welfare nation. And that's very important to have this broad support in the society as a whole. But the most successful thing so far is that we have invited different industrial sectors to produce their own roadmaps for fossil-free competitiveness. And that has been really very exciting to work with these industrial sectors. And that really surprised me that they are so on the edge and see the possibilities of being fossil-free in different industrial sectors. So our role in that perspective is to invite them, to support them, and also have a sort of communication together with them to produce different articles and also conferences. So these roadmaps also be part of a Swedish storytelling that people all over the country know that now we are changing and the industrial leaders are in the front. That gives us a unique position because we have also strong pressure on the parliament and on the government to speed up the tempo and to deliver more ambitious regulations and support system to reduce risks for these sectors. And this, of course, very happy to be a politician in Sweden because to have a strong support from these industrial sectors make it easy to be a politician and to make this fossil-free welfare nation. I think the role is rather specific because it's a hybrid, you can say. We are paid by the government, but we are independent from them. We can say what we want to say. Mostly we support the industry in different way, as I said before, also to coach them in some direction and also make it possible for them to have a strong impact on the government. But we're also supporting the parliament as a whole, but especially the government, to make some priorities. Which type of decisions is most necessary just now? So sometimes I feel together with Malin and others in this office, we work as the dance teachers. I mean, we need to take it together. Sometimes we say we need two for a tango, but we've changed the language now to say that we need a square dance, because we need the local municipalities, the consumers, the universities, and all actors together need to work together and collaborate if we should manage this huge challenge to be the fossil-free wealth nation. But it's my feeling just now is very, very good, and I see we take step by step, and I think we have a unique language now, and I think we have perhaps the most important thing so far is that we have changed the mindset step by step to see that we now have a discussion. How can we produce climate neutral cement? We have this fossil-free steel production. We have fossil-free iron production. We shift from fossil refineries to biorefineries. So this is huge storytelling now in the newspapers, how we now changing. And I think many people in their homes sitting there and just wondering, okay, now it's happening. They really changed the production system. So that's the work so far, and it's so nice to be part of this movement.
It's great to hear. So Fossil Free Sweden is a government initiative with the aim of speeding up climate action in industry and with different actors, as you said. And you started to tell about the road mapping process. Do you want to say what is so unique by this sector road mapping process that Fossil Free Sweden has been doing?
Yes, it's. I think many countries produce roadmaps, but it is voluntary bottom-up process. So they're their own processes. We have helped them, but they own these roadmaps themselves, and that's a crucial thing. And that's very, very important, because now they can work with this in the long run, and we don't be part of this long story. So that's a unique part of this process. We can also say that these roadmaps are very important because people all over the country want to know if it's possible or not. So the keystone, you can say, in these roadmaps are that they show how they can be fossil-free by electricity or hydrogen or biofuels or efficiency technology. They can show how they could be fossil-free, and that's very important because people among us don't know how it would be possible. Then we have the timetables. They take step by step and show us that they're not waiting to 2045. They take step by step during this time. They have their own commitments. They don't only ask for the government's decision. They have a roadmap themselves to do their commitments, and also expectations of others actors, as I mentioned. We need a square dance. So here we also have demand for other actors to do their homework. So that's something in that. But I think they say themselves that it's very important to declare that they cannot do this themselves, because they need to have support from the government and speed up the tempo in decision and give us electricity at the right time, at right place, and so on. So infrastructure is very, very important homework now in Sweden to realize these roadmaps.
Okay, so it has been a bottom-up process, and they describe their climate actions and milestones and policy proposals. But what would you say? What difference have those roadmaps? What kind of development has started when those roadmaps have been developed by the sectors?
I think that depends on which type of sector we talk about, and I think we can hear more about that later on. But as I said, I think the most interesting thing is that the people in the country realize that the companies and the industry are in the forefront. They can show the possibilities and don't say no to everything. They accept the challenge and see the possibilities of being fossil-free. And I think that mindset is far away from the UN negotiation process that they always talk about burden and costs and all that. But in Sweden, we say we want to be the first, and we think it's good for the welfare as a whole. And that type of story is now supported very strongly from industrial leaders. So the industrial leaders are very important storytellers. So people all over the society realize that this is really good for jobs and growth in different parts of Sweden. I think that is that have also surprised me that this message is so strong.
And the government have received those roadmaps. How do you think that what is your perception of their response, and how do they like it, or do they get stressed?
I think they are happy. I believe so, because we have the same target and we have the same vision, and the government and the strong support from all parties, you can say, the parliament, say that we want to be net zero 2045, and I think it will be earlier than that. So it's of course very nice to have industrial leaders that support that vision and make it possible for the politicians to take rather ambitious decisions. In many countries, they are afraid of doing that because people in the street believe it's very painful. But if we have this strong support from the environmental movement up to the industrial leaders to say, we think it's good for the local economy, for the job, and for the welfare as a whole, why hesitate? So it must be lovely to be politicians in Sweden.
Okay, last question before we talk to the sectors themselves. Are you hopeful that those policy proposals will be implemented by the Swedish government?
Yes, I'm convinced about that, because not all of them, but mostly the most important proposals, and we help the government to make our priority for them. And it's not rocket science. It's to reduce risks. That's the main task, and the other task is to invest in infrastructure. And I believe that they accept that type of homework and are happy to have the support of this. So I'm very hopeful about Sweden, but not about the world. But perhaps we can have a new language, because if we can have a strong impact on the negotiation process and say, this is not painful, I think that's absolutely the most important language we can export.
Okay, thank you, Svante Axelsson, and you will come back to comment in the end of this seminar. But now let's move in the program, and we will talk with 3 different sectors that have developed their own roadmaps for how to reach net zero or climate neutrality until the latest 2045, which is the Swedish target. And I think I might surprise some of you by presenting the first sector that will present here today, and that's actually the petroleum and biofuel industry that will reach climate neutrality in Sweden in 2045. So I want to say welcome to Johan G. Andersson, CEO of Drivkraft Sverige, and also the chairman of World Energy Council Sweden. So the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Malin, and thank you, Svante, for the, as always, inspiring words to start off this webinar. And also thank you for the opportunity to connect the World Energy Council with Fossil Free Sweden, and to share how my industry has embraced this challenge to become climate neutral and at the same time improve competitiveness in Sweden. So, as Malin said, my name is Johan Andersson, and in my day job, I lead the Industry Association for refiners and distributors of petroleum, biofuels, and a wide range of mobility solutions, including liquid fuels, bitumen, process oils, but also charging infrastructure and a lot of new mobility solutions in the retail network. So we are involved along the whole value chain, from raw material production, refining, logistics, distribution, and marketing, and we fuel approximately 99% of the Swedish market, as well as also being a big export industry where we export our products across the globe. We have a number of production facilities and refineries, both in Sweden and abroad, and we have terminals across the country and more than 3,000 service stations. So we are truly in the industry that keeps Sweden moving every day, year in, year out. But the downside is my industry is also producing and distributing products emitting more than 20 million tons of CO2 annually, and around 2 to 3 million tons of CO2 in our own operations. So climate action is a given part of the agenda every day. And we are proud to say that Sweden is at the front line of emission reduction due to a very progressive industry already today. But we need to do so much more. And Sweden is a very large country, which needs mobility to stay competitive. And our products, they fuel mobility across a wide range of sectors, industries, and society. So what we need to do is to address emissions, not the access to mobility. And 2 years ago, I actually joined this organization, and about the same time I met Svante and Malin for the first time as well. And my industry and I took the lead in forming this alliance with Fossil Free Sweden and my industry. We took a difficult decision, but the right decision to join Fossil Free Sweden to help us to create this roadmap for climate neutrality, to support the delivery of Sweden's ambitious objectives, and also to integrate our own roadmap with the 22 other roadmaps that already were either in existence or in development in this initiative. And the fact that many of those roadmaps, they rely on our roadmap to become climate neutral by 2045 or earlier, because they rely on our fuel and our mobility solutions to become climate neutral themselves. We also joined the initiative to help influence the thinking about climate neutrality and competitiveness, and to ensure that Sweden can not only become an idealistic role model, but also commercial role model. As Svante said, we shouldn't talk about this being painful. We actually need to prove that this is a commercially viable strategy as well, because otherwise industry would never sign up to do this. And also to ensure that policymakers and regulators listen to a coordinated request for long-term, stable and competitive conditions in favor of cost-effective transition to climate neutral society. So we need to help and guide and risk manage the situation for the politicians as well, so that they can be bold in their decision making. So in February 2020, we launched our industry's roadmap for climate neutral competitiveness. It took us about 9 months to create the roadmap, and the process to align those companies along the whole value chain. And you need to remember that along the value chain, the companies in my association or my industry, they are both competitors, customers, and suppliers to each other. So to get them aligned around the shared vision and what critical enablers are needed to make this happen was hard work, but a lot of fun as well. And it brought the industry together, and we're now standing much more united than we ever had in the past, which is great in terms of giving us the opportunity to actually reach these objectives. Our plan is anchored in reality, we say, and it points to some key commitments from the industry, which is to become climate neutral in our own operations by 2030 or earlier, and to become climate neutral in our whole value chain by 2045 or earlier. And to go with that, we are committing to invest somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 billion Swedish kronas in the transformation over the time period. And it also contains a number of critical political enablers and proposes tangible actions for the politicians to take, so they can help us create the conditions for a competitive transformation. So now we're 1 year along since we launched our roadmap, and we're already thinking about climate action plan or roadmap 2.0, because the world is changing so fast around us, and the industry is changing even faster at times as well, and taking massive decisions towards the 2045 objective, which is, as Svante said, pointing to possibilities to reach the objectives even earlier than 2045 in some areas. And we couldn't foresee this 12 months ago, so we can only imagine what it's going to look like in another 12 months. As a side effect of the roadmap that we produced, we also changed the name of our organization. We used to be called the Swedish Petroleum and Biofuels Institute, and we changed that name to Drivkraft Sverige, which basically stands for the driving force for Sweden, where the motto is that we stand for sustainable and innovative mobility solutions. And that is to better reflect the ambition of our industry and the companies who are operating within our industry. So now we're looking forward to the next steps together with Fossil Free Sweden and to put even more positive pressure on the policymakers to make this transformation happen even faster. Thanks.
Thank you, Johan. Very inspiring to hear, although I've been seeing this very closely during the process also. And you are such an important enabler. Yes, and there we see the roadmap itself. Just a short follow-up question here. You touched upon it yourself, but the climate neutrality and the link to competitiveness. Do you have the feeling you had to argue a lot around this with your members, or was it completely easy?
I would say that there are two aspects to this. One is no. To answer your questions, it's a no. I didn't have to argue a lot because it's quite clear for everyone who's doing their market analysis that climate neutral solutions will be, or they are already more attractive today, and they will become even more attractive in the future. And thereby they contribute to commercial growth for any company involved in those solutions. So it's simple market economics. You need to invest in solutions that the market are willing to pay for. The other aspect of competitiveness as well and climate neutrality is that, as I said before, many users, or almost all users of mobility in Sweden, they use our products and they need reliable and affordable solutions, which are also sustainable. So otherwise they won't remain competitive, and it's not going to create conditions for a welfare society, as Svante put it. So competitiveness is important for all of us, and it's closely linked with climate neutrality. It's not in conflict at all.
Thank you, Johan. Very inspiring. And we will now hear the next sector roadmap. This sector is the gas sector, which will also turn fossil free or climate neutral in 2045. And I'm very happy to introduce you to Maria Malmqvist, CEO of the Swedish Gas Association. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Malin. And I'm also, of course, active within the World Energy Council in Sweden. And the Swedish Gas Association, of course, works with all energy gases. So it's like both natural gas, biogas, LPG, bio-LPG, hydrogen, and all the energy gases there are. And in the program, you maybe saw that a question was presented. Is gas a part of the problem or a part of the solution? And to make this speech very short, the answer to the question is yes. Of course, the gas business is a part of the solution. In fact, at first, when we heard about the initiative regarding roadmaps towards 2045 by Fossil Free Sweden, we said that since energy gases is used in different sectors, we should try to contribute to the work in these sectors instead of having an own roadmap. So we then participated in the work to create a roadmap for the steel industry, for the shipping, for transport. And then when they had their roadmaps, we realized we were a bit jealous and wanted a roadmap of our own. So the Swedish Gas Association has about 150 member companies, and we worked for a year or so to get them all together and unite them in the ambition towards 2045. The gas business means that energy gases are facilitating the transition. Sweden has, as the earlier speaker already has said, made a considerable headway in the transition to a sustainable fossil-free society. Nevertheless, there are still major challenges in a number of areas, and energy gases can offer a solution. So the Swedish gas industry has drawn up this roadmap to show how energy gases can contribute to promoting fossil-free competitiveness. The roadmap is a result of the commitment and the collaboration that has emerged between many of the companies and organizations responsible for the following vision that we have until 2045. And that is that all energy gases used in Sweden will be completely fossil-free by 2045 at the latest. And also the potential for producing renewable gas will be realized. So as a part of this realization of the vision of completely fossil-free energy gases by 2045, the climate roadmap produced by the gas industry also includes 3 objectives. So by 2023, all CNG compressed natural gas for transport will be biomethane. And we also have a goal for 2030 around liquefied gas in the transport sector. And also that all energy gases in the power and heating sector in 2030 will be completely fossil-free. So these are very ambitious goals, of course, but we are determined to reach them and are working hard also with our own undertakings. There are 11 of them in the roadmap. And we also have 4 challenges to the politicians that we do hope will come true in the future. Thanks a lot.
And thank you to you, Maria. Very inspiring to hear. In this work of developing this bottom-up roadmap that you have done, what you just explained, it's a lot of work with gathering and motivating all your members and the whole sector and the value chain. Do you consider it hard? What's the hard work for you to gather the gas sector and make them being on the same track?
No, I don't think that was very hard. I think it was a lot of work, but not a very hard work. And we had a lot of discussions during the whole time. It took us about a year. And we had some very critical questions that we had to agree on. And that took a while, but after some meetings and discussions and workshops, we all ended up with the vision that we have and that everyone stands behind. So that feels very good, of course.
Was it even too easy? It sounds very easy.
No, not too easy. But like Johan said, a lot of things happen. So we have also recognized that maybe if we should have written it now, maybe we should have a bit more hydrogen and undertakings around hydrogen in it than we have. So I think it's an ongoing process together with the industry to develop the roadmap over time.
Yes, of course. So thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now move to the next sector, which is also one of these enablers for all other sectors. And it is the energy sector, and it's the organization called Swed Energy. And they have been involved both in the electricity roadmap and in the heating roadmap. And I'm very happy to introduce you, Åsa Pettersson, CEO of Swed Energy. And you have been the CEO just over one month now. We will not go into how that feels, but more into the roadmap. These roadmaps for fossil-free competitiveness are not new to you, though. Please tell us about your roadmap. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Malin. And thanks for the invitation. Very nice to be here, to be able to share with you our views from the energy sector on the roadmaps and the work ahead. No, it's true. I actually just came from the transport sector into this position. So I was heavily involved in developing the roadmap for the transport sector, but that's for another seminar. But it remains true that we are the enabler in the energy sector. The answer to a lot of things happening in society right now is spelled electricity or clean energy. Our members at Swed Energy, we have 400 members producing, distributing, selling or storing heat and or electricity. We stand in the midst of this. And as Malin said, we've developed not only one, but 2 roadmaps. So one for electricity and one for heat. The Swedish energy system is basically already fossil free, as we know. It's 98% fossil free, and it's a system that we're very proud of. Nonetheless, we know that what we have today will not be enough to answer to this transition that we see in society, where industry and the transport sector and other sectors as well are asking for our products to be able to deal with their transition. So we need to develop actually, we have already updated the numbers that were presented in our roadmaps. We presented 2 weeks ago an updated scenario analysis to complete our roadmaps, because we can already see that the numbers we presented back then have changed completely. So we're not looking anymore at, back then we thought that the demand for electricity would increase with around 50 terawatt hours. But now we can see that we're talking probably, today we have 114, the Swedish system, but we're talking of more than a doubling towards 2045 to meet Sweden's target of becoming climate neutral. And this of course includes all these important industry transition processes that have been communicated lately, with both battery production and not the least green steel production, of course, and the transition of the transport sector. We know, Svante said it, we have 22 roadmaps, and we are responsible for 2 of these. And as almost all of the other roadmaps, the other 20 points towards the increased use of fossil-free energy, electricity and or biofuels, we really, as I've already said, see ourselves in the center of this transition. The electricity needs to increase to produce the hydrogen needed, to produce the electricity for the transport sector, and in other electrical processes in mining, etc. And heating is as well very, very important for keeping the system in balance going forward. So in one way, you can say that we make the other 20 roadmaps possible, and we're very happy to take that road. I know I compete with Maria and Johan here on this, so we're very, very happy to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Åsa. Very, very inspiring to hear about your 2 roadmaps that are both very important for the whole transition. And I asked the same question to you about this gathering and motivating and influencing in the sector. What has it meant for you within like cooperation between companies in the energy sector when you developed this roadmap?
Well, it's been a very important process for us to focus on a common goal. And really be able also to make our prioritizations clear together as an industry. And of course, the communication with policymakers is a very important part of the roadmap. Of course, our commitments as a sector, but not the least, what do we need from policymakers? And of course, here we have, I would like to lift 3 things that we think are important. That we need a common approach from our policymakers, that they can agree not only upon the future need for more energy, but also upon the efforts and costs that this will require. And what does that mean then? Well, that's the second thing. We need huge investments, as Svante said, in infrastructure. And for us, that then particularly means power production and not at least the power grid. This requires several actions, which we have pointed out both in the roadmaps, but also we have followed this up in a very detailed and granular way in our timelines, where we actually point to what action will be needed when to be able to achieve this. So I think this dialogue, very open dialogue with policymakers is very important to agree on the road forward. And the third thing that I would like to lift is a system for negative carbon emissions. This is when the carbon emissions from biofuels are captured and stored and thus removed from the carbon cycle entirely. And our goal is to be able to offer negative carbon emissions in the future from the energy sector.
Yes, thank you. And talking about your timelines, those are really brilliant, and I recommend everybody to go and watch. They're really detailed and say exactly what the government and other actors need to do. So I can really recommend to look at them. So thank you very much, Åsa, and very inspiring to listen about the electricity and heating sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly.
And we will now be even more inspired and talk to representatives from other countries. We have now talked about electricity, fuel, and gas sectors, all of which are members in the World Energy Council. And we are so happy to have the CEO of World Energy Council Germany here in our seminar, Carsten Rolle. And I would like to start to ask you, how do you see the relationship between competitiveness and climate action?
Well, thank you very much, Marlin, for the kind invitation. Thank you for having me. And in fact, I'm serving as the SecGen of the German section of the World Energy Council. And with my main job, I'm head of the Energy and Climate Policy team of the Federation of German Industries. And in this position, just 3 years ago, we also developed a roadmap, this one, climate pathways for Germany up to 2050 at that time. And that was very similar, I think, to what you just discussed, an exercise where we brought together many experts from German industry, roughly more than 150, in a process over a year to develop the roadmap, how to get climate neutral by mid-century. And in fact, I think at that time I was also in Stockholm at the Royal Academy of Engineers presenting that at that time when you had the similar discussions. On your question, competitiveness versus climate action. We and German industry, of course, also sees a chance to get technology leadership in different areas. In these days, we discuss a lot about hydrogen and the role of hydrogen in the future. There's a hydrogen roadmap being developed, a governmental strategy we've worked on, and so forth. Of course, there's chances also for industry to get a lead position in future technologies, and that is interesting. But as you said, of course, there's also the other part on how to really make sure that competitiveness is not lost, as most of the investments needed will cost an extra to what the existing technologies do. And that was we also looked in the study. We looked at up to 2050, 2.3 billion euro extra investment needed for Germany in total, not only industry, all sectors, transport, housing, and so forth. And 80% of that would need an extra push as they're not economically viable for the individual. They make sense for the country, but for the individual, it needs CO2 pricing, subsidy, quota, whatsoever extra policy mix to enable that and to make that really happen. So competitiveness is important on the way, otherwise you lose the companies. And the more international, of course, the exercise, the better. So we start, of course, with national instruments. We hope to Europeanize these instruments, CO2 pricing, not only for the ETS sectors, but also for the others. And the overall aim is, and I think there is a window of opportunity to get CO2 pricing at least at the G20 level done, as the US and other partners now have a different view on these issues, and that there's a chance.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned a lot of solutions and also the need of a policy mix. And what we have talked about a little bit earlier with the roadmaps is how to basically how to cooperate between industry and government more closely. How do you think that cooperation works in your country or in Europe? Do you think the industry get listened to by the government? And do you believe these policy mix that are required will be implemented?
There are ups and downs, to be honest. With our study at that time, 3 years ago, there were many open doors and ears to talk to, and there was high interest, and it's still quoted by academia and politicians for bringing the investment figures down to the table. That was helpful, and it still is. On the other hand, as we speak in these days, German government very spontaneously is about to change its climate policy targets in 2030, in 2045, and for each year in between, for every sector. That was a decision really taken within a weekend, with the possibility to comment on within less than 24 hours. And these processes, of course, are not the way we think of, let's discuss impact assessments, let's discuss roadmaps, let's discuss how we can reach and achieve the targets. It's more, as we have elections in autumn, The old political reflex to spontaneously give targets and then later look how we can reach them. And that, of course, is a bit counterproductive. In the end, we just started beginning this year to do a second study by defining the policy mix needed for the at least existing or now the new targets. And I think this is the big issue that has to be solved. We're talking about singular instruments. What's the role of CO2 pricing? What's the role of CAPEX, OPEX subsidies, and so forth? But I think, at least for Germany, I don't know any study that has added up different instruments and how we can bridge the gap. And that's what we want to do. How much CO2 pricing, how much subsidy, how many quotas, and how can really bring and start the investments needed. That's the big exercise that's necessary.
Yeah, and that's what all countries, I guess, are trying to figure out right now, how to do that and to get all the investment that all countries want to have. A last question for you. When you hear the Swedish roadmaps, the bottom-up process, the way these sectors have worked, what do you think? What are your reflections? Do you think like, oh, the Scandinavians, they have their own conditions? Or do you think this is applicable, some elements of it? Or what's your reflections?
Well, I think we are very close, not only with the targets, as we say, we discuss about 2045 now getting climate neutral. We do see roadmaps on European level for many sectors, steel, cement, they all have their branch roadmaps, how to get climate neutral over the next decades. I think it is quite interesting, your bottom-up approach that has been, I don't know, somehow orchestrated maybe by someone, by government, but still is somehow bottom-up and seems to be quite influential also when it comes to the political answers. This dialogue on an equal basis is something I think we can learn from. There are many exercises similar to yours, I think, from industry, as I said, and rightly so. But of course, we would wish to see also this taken up and being discussed to make it happen, as there are, of course, many challenges, not only when it comes to money, it's also about licensing procedures. We have long times to get acceptance to build whatever infrastructure. We have some technology issues for new technologies, including CCUS, that will be needed at least for some parts, cement production or so, where public acceptance still is an issue, and politicians have to go forward. All of that needs strong dialogue and cooperation, and maybe we can learn a bit from the Scandinavian model in that respect.
Okay, thank you very much, Carsten Rolle. And thank you for participating in our seminar and giving your views on this. Thank you.
Great.
And we will now turn to the next country or representative from a country, and that's In Hee Chung, who is the CSO at Elget Chem in Korea. Welcome. And I want to start with a similar question to you, because we talk so much about the relationship between competitiveness and climate action. And how do you, in your company and in your country as a whole, maybe, see this relationship?
Thank you, Malin, for the invitation. I'm very happy to diversify the geographical representation of this webinar. I mean, this day and age, I think competitiveness equals companies who have really taken that leadership role in climate action. It's not something that's mutually exclusive. Companies that have really taken that initial leadership role in climate action is now become much more competitive, not only probably in Europe, that's been discussed for some time, but not only in Europe, but also in Asia and of course in Korea. Over the last couple of years, mainly the concept of sustainability, climate neutrality, and more specifically ESG, environmental, social and governance issues have really been a very hot topic in Korea, and companies have now been setting up like committees or a separate department just focusing on how to set up their sustainability and climate neutrality strategy. So I think more and more climate action is becoming a part and parcel of competitiveness of a company. And of course, this has been mentioned, but we have to really make some of these climate action commercially viable, because at the end of the day, we have to look at the bottom line. Companies need to make profits to be commercially viable, financially viable. So really translating then how the climate action then can become a sustainable business model for that company, I think is key. LG Chem is predominantly a petrochemical company, although we do have a what we call advanced materials division, as well as a pharmaceutical division. Our EV battery division has spun off, so now they become a separate company called LG Energy Solutions. But our advanced materials business unit actually manufactures a cathode material to the LG Energy Solutions. So we sort of are part of the value chain of the EV batteries. So, that could be maybe, regarded as a sort of a competitive business model for companies who used to be predominantly petrochemical based to really then become more competitive in a sort of climate neutral, sustainable economy.
Okay, thank you. Very inspiring. And you have a lot of products that actually also are enablers, like the batteries and the chemistry for other companies. How is the discussion internally? Do you think it has been a hard journey for you to switch around and to talk about sustainability in your company?
So I think the real key element here, especially in Korea or maybe in the Asian corporate culture, is the CEO's commitment and the CEO or the C-suite level understanding of the issue. And we're very fortunate to have a CEO who really understands the issue. He really gets the fact that unless we work on sustainability, climate neutrality now, we will probably not be existing in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. And this is something that is not going to go away. It's going to come. So we might as well, do it head on and be more of a leader rather than a laggard. So I think the top management commitment and top management understanding of the issue is key. Of course, the next level is to really trickle those concepts down to the shop level, right? The facility level. And that is challenging. And we are still in the process of doing that. But I think, communicating to employees, to different business units from multiple levels has really worked. Because I think LG Chem's sustainability strategy was completed. It was under works in 2019, where a lot of the engagement happened within the company. And then in 2020, which was last year, that's when the business units had to now come up with a concrete plan to say reduce X amount of carbon emissions from the operations, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're in the process of really incorporating this to even our portfolio revision. Because a big chunk of the portfolio that we have been very relying on has been, energy intensive and very petrochemical based sort of way of operations. But now we're trying to shift that into bioeconomy related materials, as well as applying circular economy, for example, mechanically recycled plastic. So reusing the waste plastic to make new plastic, what we call the post-consumer recycled PCR plastic. So that portfolio will increase 6 times by 2025, and that's sort of our goal.
Thank you. What you're saying is a very interesting perspective, that you are driven not only by increasing competitiveness, but also decreasing the risk of having wrong products when the demand in the world is shifting. And this risk, we have talked a lot about the cooperation with government and policymakers. How do you consider the culture, the way of working in Korea, the government and companies together? Do they listen to you?
So we do have associations. I see that our previous speaker has been coming from associations. So we have an industry association as well. We are part of a petrochemical association. And within that association, of course, LG Chem is a member, so is Lotte Chemical and SK Innovation and other chemical companies in Korea. And so they are sort of our interface between the government and the company. So they have been sort of our, first port of call, I would say, in terms of like really trying to voice industry concerns. But increasingly now, because Korea also has announced going climate neutral by 2050, whereas we have a long way to go. I mean, we still use we still have coal plants in Korea. Fossil our energy system is quite it needs to be defossilized. It needs to be fossil free. So that's something in the works. But you know, to make that happen, of course, industry will be affected, and industry's voice needs to be reflected. So the associations have been helping in that regard. But I think over the last couple of maybe months, because Korea announced going climate neutral by 2050 in December last year, not that long ago. So over the last couple of like 6-7 months or so, our ministries and government have been sort of having these webinars and these committees, and they've been inviting the association as well as individual companies. And I've been to a couple as well, just to really, you know, hear some bottom-up concerns and approaches. So they have been trying to do that. But I think traditionally, Korean government have been, it's more of a command and control way of doing things, right? And sort of coming up with some incentives and some enabling environment. I think that's what the shift that we really need to take for us to really reach that 2050 neutrality goal. Because at the end of the day, industry has to take a very active role in making the 2050 neutrality happen.
Thank you. And last question, you touched upon it yourself, but we talked about this bottom-up, this road mapping process that the Scandinavians, or like the Swedes, have done now. What elements do you think, what are your reflections when you hear this, and what elements do you think would be interesting in your context?
So I think having an independent body like Fossil Free Sweden, sort of coordinating these very complex different stakeholders, I think that's very, very interesting. I think Korea should be interested in really benchmarking that. We like benchmarking, you know, good practices. So it's a huge undertaking, and there's so many interests involved. You know, no one ministry can really handle. Of course, there is a interministerial committee of some sorts, but I feel that it's not enough. Maybe that ministry can administer, you know, working with setting up this kind of independent body like Fossil Free Sweden for Korea to make some roadmaps, bottom-up roadmaps, as well as top-down policy vision. So I think that is a strong element that I think would be very, very good for Korea to sort of emulate. And you know, this multi-stakeholder involvement is, I know it's easier said than done. It's a huge undertaking. So I do commend, you know, the roadmap leaders of each industry associations who have come up with a roadmap, because it's a huge undertaking. But you know, having a national level roadmap is a humongous, very, very challenging work. So you really need a very dedicated, independent, a professional body that can help this to make this happen. And I think I fear, because maybe this is also the case with other countries, but you know, government, they have their horizon, right? In Korea, it's 5 years. After that, the government changes, and you know, climate neutrality issues should not be reliant on governmental change, and that's something that we have to address as well. And I think having an independent body that is not linked to any party would actually carry that through to the next government if it changes, etc. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting aspects. And yes, I agree. We are also very, very impressed by our industry association leaders who have managed to gather these roadmaps and motivate and gather. So thank you very much, In-hee Chung, for participating and for your very, very clever comments and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Malin. Pleasure.
And we will now turn to one of the three partners of this seminar, LEADIT, the Leadership Group for Industry Transition. And I would like to welcome Gotche Mete. You are working with 15, I think, countries that are members of LEADIT. And I so interested in your reflections on what you have heard. And if you can see any elements in roadmaps or the discussion that has been today that could be applicable in those countries, your member countries. The mic is yours.
Thanks a lot, Malin. As you've repeatedly said, it is a really, really inspiring process. We are very much within LEADIT inspired by Fossil Free Sweden's work. Indeed, as you have mentioned, LEADIT brings together 15 countries and 16 companies, and it's a growing number across the world. That includes Korea, Australia, Argentina, India. Of course, India and Sweden are co-leads. We are established under the UN Climate Action Summit, so our work is of global nature. And by our inspiration from Fossil-Free Sweden's work, and of course, those who have developed the roadmaps with you, led us to actually launch an industry transition tracker where you can track different roadmaps across the globe. It's available at our website. But what we have seen during the process is that these roadmaps are not harmonized across the globe. So it's important to set sort of a standard, and that harmonization is really, really missing, and it's something I hope that will happen going forward. Another inspiration that has led for us to develop another tool is our how-to guide. So from what we've learned from your experience and other experiences from the transition tracker and our leaded members, we've now developed a how-to guide, which has an international nature for countries, especially in emerging economies, developing world, global south, that can use this how-to guide. And we really look forward to sharing this experience, across the borders. I think it's really this is what will take industry forward. So thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. Very, very proud to be partnering with you in this event. Thank you so much, Malin.
Thank you very much, Gutche, and thank you for partnering up on this seminar as well. And I will now go back to the Swedish National Coordinator for Fossil-Free Sweden, Svante Axelsson, and I'm so curious to hear your reflections of today's seminars and all these comments that we have heard on the method, on competitiveness, and or on other things. So what do you think, Svante?
Yes, I can't get the video on, but I can talk without video. I'm trying. Perhaps someone could help me. It's been very exciting to listen to different speakers. The Swedish guys I know a lot, but it was especially interesting to hear about what Carsten Roller said, and also Tia Chung here is. My first reflection is that also Johan mentioned that the time and the market is changing so rapidly, and that makes it a high risk if we don't change. So the threat is if we don't move now, we can not be part of the market in the long run. And then I also catch up some exciting thoughts that we talk about bottom-up process, even when we talk about implementation of infrastructure. Carsten said that we need support from different regions and the people who are living there that need to accept different constructions and the grids and so on. So perhaps we can have a sort of bottom-up process to get a strong acceptance when we take rather tough and ambitious decisions in different parts of the country. Also interesting to see how we can bridge the gap. And I was looking for if Carsten want to pronounce even the value change and the demand perspective. We used to need regulations and taxes and subsidies, but I'm really surprised that we now have a strong demand perspective in the value chain that can make this gap even smaller. And then, of course, very happy to hear that South Korea want to have national coordinator for fossil-free Korea and a type of body. And it should be very exciting, as we have talked about sometimes. How can we let industrial leaders meet other industrial leaders in other countries, so we can hear different analysis and language. So that would be very, very interesting, especially to go to South Korea and what they can do there. That's my spontaneous reflections without video.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting, Svante, very interesting reflections. So it's not easy to summarize this, but what we heard is that 22 sectors in Sweden have developed their own bottom-up roadmaps on how to reach net zero emissions in 2045 and also increase their competitiveness. We've also heard that climate action and competitiveness goes hand in hand in most sectors, although there are still challenges. it's a global trend or trend. It's a clear road ahead that competitiveness is the driver for net zero actions. And we hope that it not will be painful. What I have learned is that it could be interesting with these bottom-up road mapping processes in other countries. There might be needed this independent role that fossil-free Sweden has played. And of course, the right policy mix and the right industry actions is of course a key for the whole transition. That is the objective of these roadmaps to happen. So with that, I want to thank all of you fantastic speakers, and a special thanks to our guests from Germany and Korea, Karsten Rolle and In-Hee Chung. And thank you to all of you that had watched and listened to today's seminar. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.